I think we'll go ahead. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm C.B. Wilson. I'm the Associate Provost for Academic Personnel, and here to help me answer your questions is my colleague Chris Staples, who works also in our office. This is a session about sabbatic leave. However, because I assume that everyone here has been here for several years, 5 or 6 years at least, and that's why you're here, because you have to be here 6 years in order to be eligible for one of these leaves, that you're also familiar with what used to be called the Professional Development Program. And we have kind of blended all that together, and I'm going to sort of give you some background on that in case you thought that you were going to be, or that we were going to be talking about what we affectionately have referred to as the PDP. But before I do anything else, what I'd like to do is to simply go around the room, ask you to identify yourself, name, department. If you are a 12-month faculty member, because I assume most of you here are 9-month faculty members, and also if you are a TAP, a RAP, or, I'm sorry, now a SAP. We've changed the clinical assistant professor concept to using the prefix of service. So for better or for worse, we have a different acronym in play. So I'm going to start here with Nick.
My name is Nick Bowman. I'm Associate Professor in Communication Studies and a 9-month faculty.
Nikki Holcomb, Associate Professor in Physics and Astronomy,
Okay.
9-month faculty.
Okay.
Reagan Curtis, Professor in Learning Sciences and Human Development, 12-month chair.
Right.
Jane Brandel, I'm Chair of Communication Sciences and Disorders, but I'm actually here for a faculty member that had a different obligation.
Okay.
I am Costa Sierra's Associate Professor of Mechanical Engineering.
I'm Hyejeong Kim, School of Social Work, Associate Professor, 9 months.
Okay.
I'm Manal Natur, Associate Professor of Arabic Studies and World Languages Department.
Okay.
I'm Dave Graham, Associate Professor in Electrical Engineering, 9 months.
Ed Sobalski, I'm an Associate Professor in Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering. I'm also 9 months.
Okay.
General Hambrick, Associate Professor in Advanced, and I'm 9 months.
Ibrahim Fati, Associate Professor, Petroleum and Natural Gas Engineering, 9 months.
John Winkler, Professor of Music, 9 months.
Jeff Georgi, Professor of Philosophy, Associate Professor of Philosophy. Should get ahead of myself. 9 months.
Ned Flagg, I'm Assistant Professor in Physics and Astronomy, also 9 months.
Janet Toe, Human Nutrition and Foods, Professor, 9 months.
Jim Puyo, Professor of Animal Science, 9 months.
Ranjita Misra, Social Behavioral Sciences, School of Public Health, 12 months, Professor.
Okay.
Brad Humphreys, Professor of Economics, 9 months.
Jane Saspigas, Associate Professor in Economics, 9 months.
I'm Emily Phillips. I'm here from the School of Medicine, just representing the Chair of Emergency Medicine.
Okay.
Lisa Dilks, Associate Professor of Sociology, 9 months.
Okay. And I think you were the only person that said that you were an assistant professor, right?
Yes, currently.
And so the assumption is that, yeah, right, I get that. And so I hate to put it this way, but if you are successful, then you will have accumulated the appropriate 6-year period.
Right.
And if your application for a sabbatic is successful, and I hate to put it that way because our office has rarely turned down such an application. I mean, it goes through, obviously, another vetting process with your department chair and your dean and so on, and sometimes your colleagues. But since the sabbatic letters typically come out a little before the actual P&T decisions, then there would be special language in your letter that says that you need to have achieved tenure in order for you to get the sabbatical. That's just a nuance. I don't want to make a negative.
Seems pretty straightforward.
But yeah, right.
I'm not going to get the sabbatical before it.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay.
You're not going to give me sabbatical if you're going to kick me out.
See, and he has figured that out already, so Those are points in your favor, right? This is being televised, by the way, and it will be, actually it will be, it's being recorded. I'm not remembering that we ever recorded one of the sabbatic sessions before. We may have, and so, but if we have, and you can tune in to the Teaching and Learning Commons, and if you choose to look at whatever is there, you will be able to compare what I tell you today to see if I'm consistent, okay? This session is programmed to go to 5 o'clock, I think. We will not be here that long. First of all, the information that you have in front of you is fairly straightforward. And in fact, this is an opportunity, more of an opportunity for you to ask questions about that than it is necessarily for me to explain the whole thing. But let me back up again to address what I mentioned before. Up until we changed a significant number of what were called Board of Governors policies, which have now become Board of Governors rules, there was a second program called the Professional Development Program, which what we tried to do in the context of having these two programs is to focus research projects into the sabbatic leave arena, in part because over time, and this hasn't happened recently, but there was a period of time where folks in the legislature questioned whether it was a valuable thing to give faculty members a one-semester vacation with pay on the assumption that they weren't really doing anything during a sabbatic leave. And so what we tried to do was to focus research projects in the sabbatic leave program so that we could make the argument that we are a research institution, and that's the purpose of that program. Occasionally there were other kinds of projects that were really more professional development, like you might have been a blacksmith and we sold all the horses, and so you were going to retool yourself to do something else. And that's pretty much how we directed those kinds of projects into the professional development program. There were also folks in extension and some other less traditional academic units that would benefit from that kind of a situation. Now we've collapsed both of those into what is now, what you have here, Board of Governors Faculty Rule 4.3. What you will be doing as you consider applying for this program is working your way through this application process, which asks a number of questions, but part of the focus is why is the project that you have chosen important to the university? And it will also be important to your own professional development, per se. But normally these things might be for one semester. For those in health sciences, that might mean 6 months because you're on a 6-month or a 12-month contract, or a full year. And basically, the remuneration for that period of time is half of your contracted salary. So if you are 1 semester or 6 months, you'll be paid 100% of that semester salary. If you take a year off or 2 semesters, then you will be paid half of your contracted salary, which means in effect that the other half goes back to your department, and they can use that to some extent at least to do replacement teaching and that sort of thing. Another question that is often asked is, well, if I'm on half salary, particularly on the full year, does that mean I have dropped below benefits eligibility? Because theoretically, as many of you know, benefits eligibility means you must be employed 0.53 FTE. And what I've just described otherwise suspiciously sounds like now you're on a 0.5 FTE. Don't worry about that. You're still 100% covered. Even though you're on half salary, you're still on a 1.0 conceptual contract. What we've also done as we have merged these two programs is to really allow for 2 go-rounds. Used to be all the sabbatic applications had to be submitted in January, and then the PDP actually had 2 cycles, either in January or July.
What is PDP?
The Professional Development Program, which no longer exists. But what we kept under the circumstances is a second opportunity to make an application. Now, again, with a little historical background, the reason that the sabbatics were focused in January was that that would be before the next year's budget had been approved. Now we're pretty much making the assumption with different kinds of funding and so on that we could actually take sabbatical applications in July, although our preference probably is to still get them in January if we can manage. That gives you more lead time to plan and things like that. There will certainly be some of you that as you look at your project, that there will be certain kinds of grant funds available to assist you. And if you're looking at a 12-month plan, you probably are going to look for that as well. But there are occasions of a 1-semester project which is funded by some outside agency, and we can work our way through that. Okay. The assumption also is that if you are applying in January and you're imagining, okay, so I'm looking at a 1-year program, and at this point in time my salary is X. You will sign a document that basically says that you will get half your salary, but it will be half of the new year's salary if there are raises or whatever. Or in your case, since if you got promoted at that point, you would get a 10% raise, then it would be based on your new salary. Okay. Okay, now on general principles, there are a couple of conditions regarding the plan. And I want to stress that it's important for our office to help you realize your plan. Now, there's some nuances there as well. We make the assumption that the project that you propose is actually going to be the equivalent of a full-time job for however long you're going to do the job. Therefore, again, kind of because of the history, and in truth, pretty much when I started in this job, which was now 25 years ago, there was a lot more, there were many more projects that actually required somebody to go somewhere else to do the study. Now that with electronic access to libraries and all that sort of thing, it's not uncommon for a person to do a sabbatic leave and stay in Morgantown. You don't necessarily have to go overseas. By the same token, the concept here is that you should be pretty much devoting full-time to the project. So every now and again someone will say, well, you know, my project, and they imagine that this will help get approval in our office regarding that project. I really, for the time that I'm away, I won't be doing any teaching, but I'm going to stay on Committee A, Committee B, on the P&T committee, and continue to advise 14 or 15 graduate students and 100 undergraduates. No, we don't want you to do that. We want you to focus pretty much 100%. Now, occasionally you got to maintain your doctoral students or whatever, and we understand that. But we want it to be, in effect, a full-time activity. So there have been times in the past where we've looked at the project, we've looked at what the application form describes, and I will call a dean and say, you know, what this person really needs is just some release time from teaching because of all the things that they think they need to continue to do. So in that instance, if that's all the time that is required of the project, that's all you need. But the vast majority of cases are, again, full-time projects, no problems the way that I just described them. Now, I did mention that there was an instance where we literally did not approve a sabbatic application. And that was like in the mid-90s when I started this job, and the individual decided that he wanted to learn how to fly an airplane. But it had absolutely nothing to do with his academic assignment. That was an instance where we did not approve. But, I mean, again, that's part of the deal here, that what you should be proposing is something that will benefit you professionally, it will benefit your department and your college. And most of the department chairs and deans will be looking at it from that point of view as well. There will be occasions in which there will be several people from a large department who are interested in having a sabbatical. And there, it may be that the department chair is going to have to figure out priorities based on how many people he can let go at any given time. But that, again, is fairly rare. Most departments are of a size that no more than one or two individuals might be going away, and they might be going in different semesters, so that's easily manageable. But occasionally there will be 4 or 5 applicants, and then somebody has to make some decisions about that. Okay, I hinted at the notion that there were certain kinds of restrictions. When you propose a plan, and your chair approves, and your dean approves, and we approve, there are still a couple of things that you have to bear in mind. First of all, if you decide to change the plan, it has to be approved in our office. Because basically, at the end of the day, there is a notarized form that you have to complete, and part of the language in that form says that if there are any changes, it has to be approved by all parties, which includes the provost or designee, which in general would mean me under the circumstances. Generally speaking, you cannot, while you're on sabbatic, receive external remuneration. In other words, you can't be drawing your salary here and have a part-time job somewhere else without the approval of our office. Now, every now and again, particularly if somebody is on a year-long sabbatic, which means that they're at half salary, they might enter into an arrangement with like some of the engineering folks will enter into an arrangement with a commercial firm. And that gets a little bit tricky because we want to ensure that the realization of your project isn't interrupted by some kind of proprietary work for that company. However, by the same token, if what you receive, and maybe you're going to be associated with another institution, if you get what they would call, or we ask them if they can call it a fellowship or an assistantship or something like that, that's outside the boundaries of remuneration, okay? But if you are going to have some kind of a paying situation, then again, it has to be approved by our office.
What about teaching at a university?
That's a maybe, but it depends on what they call how they pay you. And very often, you can work through that. Yes?
Is there any limit on the amount of the grant or assistantship?
No, but in general, again, I'm assuming this is in the context of a year-long situation. We're probably going to expect it not to exceed your normal full-time salary, unless we're dealing with like a Fulbright grant, where a good part of the Fulbright grant is going to pay for housing and transportation overseas or something like that.
So if it's a 6 month, you don't expect to have additional grant for?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, again, I mean, I don't want to say categorically no, but it depends on the situation, and so I would be interested in more detail about the situation.
Because usually if you go for the, like, any, involving any research by any institution, there will be definitely grant, most probably, that you will be part of it, and
Well, let me answer it this way. That would be a definite maybe. And then I would want to get a little bit more written detail on that.
I just, in your case, partner with Jason Dean, based off of as you start putting this together and what that looks like for Statler colleges, guidelines and so on and so forth, because each college is going to be a little bit different too.
Yeah.
If a faculty member has an existing sort of long-term kind of grant that could conceivably be consistent with them doing the sabbatical project, can they still be drawing salary from that?
That's money. That's our money, right?
Yeah.
That's not the same thing as an external salary.
Right.
Yeah, that's a maybe. Sure. I mean, it might be used for travel or something. So, okay. The other thing, the other condition is that you must also return to the university for at least 1 year. Otherwise, you would have to repay stuff. I don't remember a situation like that. People usually don't have a problem with that. So, but that's just one other factor that you have to think about. Okay, it's fair for me to say that, assuming that you have spent the requisite amount of time at the university, that you are eligible to apply for a sabbatic. It's not an entitlement, although, as I pointed out before, we have rarely rejected a plan. But again, it has to be for the benefit of a number of different levels. Okay, my notes are predicated on the assumption that this is pre-new rule. So I'm just trying to make sure that I touch all the things that could have been in the professional development program as well. Okay, so in addition to the question of, is the project in the best interest of not only you, but the unit? Another question is, can the unit afford it? Now, this question is in here in part because of the time frame when I entered this question onto my little yellow piece of paper, because the budgeting at the institution was much different at that point. Some of you know that I used to be the chair of the music unit. My colleague who's the trumpet teacher at WVU knows that very well. But I can remember that there were instances where I had to deny, at my level in that context, deny someone the opportunity to have a sabbatic because the unit didn't have enough money to cover the difference. Now, with the entrepreneurial models and things like that, most units don't have that problem anymore. But I mention that simply because it could be a factor, and for the last couple of years, as you all know, we've had some budget issues. Okay. Okay, there is a form as part of the application that is like a cost sheet, which asks you how much, it asks you and your chair and dean to confirm what the sabbatic is going to cost. So that's typically what your salary would be for that period of time. Also, what it would cost, and I think it's still set up like this, per credit hour to cover the teaching that needs to be covered in your absence. And sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean a direct relationship, because sometimes the courses that you might teach can be deferred for a semester, or there's someone else on the faculty that can cover for you, and so on and so on. But it's not uncommon these days to actually hire an outside person. And most departments or colleges have different rates for this, X number of dollars per credit hour. What we want to know is by the credit hour what it's going to cost. But we have never rejected an application because of the numbers on that sheet. Okay, Nick?
When we're talking about the replacement cost, assume for a moment that it is a class that another colleague can teach. Would that still need to be accounted for as a replacement cost? Because,
No.
okay, so it is possible that a unit could say there actually is no replacement cost. We're just going to move this person over.
Yeah, and there are units where, in some of your instances where you're teaching more general classes, in which case a graduate student might cover, but you wouldn't have to hire an extra graduate student to do it, you know, that kind of thing. Okay. Yeah, some people will ask the question about how do you deal with the annual review? And for these purposes, the semester or the year that you are on sabbatic, it's basically 100% research and no teaching and no service. Now, there are little tweaks to that. But generally speaking, that would be how, in the subsequent annual review, that should be viewed. Okay, I think those are the main things that I would want to tell you. As I say, most of this is self-explanatory. All you have to do is work your way through it. But at this point, I'll be happy to answer your questions if you have them. Yes?
What if it's not totally 100% research? What if someone is interested to explore leadership training, want to do more about service projects that they're working on, they're not totally research?
I think that would be okay, assuming that it works its way through the system. Yeah, I mean, part of this could be leadership training. That would be consistent with what we were talking about in the professional development plan. And in truth, to some extent, the way that the two programs used to exist, what I'm calling the PDP was unique to WVU. All the other state institutions were using sabbatic leaves to do professional development kinds of things. So now we've just kind of pulled both of those together again. And of course, naturally, we will still be able to argue if somebody questions us that we're a research institution and the focus of this program is research. But it doesn't mean that something could be, some other kind of thing couldn't be used.
You mentioned earlier a scenario where you reviewed an application and it actually seemed like there were other avenues that were better for that application.
Yeah, that you could still do your project,
Yeah.
but with some tweaks.
So it's possible that your office may have, that may not necessarily be a no, but before we pursue this further,
Yeah,
maybe this other thing fits better.
yeah. Yeah, but that still is going to allow you to do your project,
Yeah,
which again is the most important thing for us.
Right.
Yes.
Are there sample applications that are available to review?
We haven't really tried to do that, but I would certainly discuss it with your department chair because they may have some models that they could talk to you about. But I mean, this is not, in a sense, this is not that complicated. Okay. John?
You talk about drawing salary or pay from other sources, like stuff we do, like if I'm subbing with Pittsburgh Symphony or we doing, is that, I'm paid for that, but I always am. But that's considered almost contributing to what I do.
Right, you should probably make a reference to that in the plan. And then, and described in about the way that you just did it there. Yeah, that there are.
Directly related to what
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
Beyond saying, like, isn't it obvious, how do you sort of spin the benefit to the university language of this? That just sort of-
Well, you have a research project, right?
Yeah.
it'll probably result in articles or publications or enhanced opportunities to get further grants. We're a Research One institution. There's a connection.
We want to stay that way.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe that's, in a way, maybe that's too obvious.
Well, that's what I was worried that I was missing something.
No, I mean, that's actually, it's a good question with a, I think, a simple answer. Yeah. General, I think you were going to ask something.
Yeah, I was just saying, can you explain again how you handle the annual report? I think I missed that.
Well, in a typical year for most of you are looking at a 40-40-20 teaching, research, and service connection. And for the semester that you're doing whatever you're doing, and in most cases it will be research, that you may tweak the percentages somehow in that annual plan, annual arrangement. So, and in other words, you wouldn't be doing any teaching in that semester. So in the annual picture, your teaching proportion within the assignment would not be the normal 40% or whatever it is.
Outside teaching, like if I teach while I'm on this.
Well, again, now we're getting into a little bit into the weeds because it depends exactly on what you're going to do in the plan.
Okay.
In the abstract in general, what the plan looks like is going to be superimposed upon the semester in which you're doing it, or the year for which you're doing it. And so the proportion of teaching, research, and service might be different. And theoretically, I mean, we kind of have to make a point of that because when there is money for annual raises, that part of that hinges on how well you do in teaching, research, and service, and part of it hinges on the proportion of teaching, research, and service that you're doing within the 100% context. So when you throw all that information together, then it kind of the formula spits out what your raise is going to be. Okay? Does that answer? No. Okay.
I could just add to that from the chair perspective. I had a faculty member do this. So you write a sabbatical report. And so when I'm writing my annual review letter relative to them for that semester, I use their sabbatical report to talk about activity that part of the year.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Sheila. Yes.
If you were to approve some external remuneration for something, and you were taking a full year off for this sabbatical leave, one question I've been asked by people who might actually give that remuneration is you get half salary for both of those semesters, or could it be paid fully one semester and not paid in the other semester?
Well, the normal assumption is that we'd have to pay you half in each semester, otherwise it would appear that you weren't here.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you have any advice for how to seek out opportunities to get funded for other half if we're doing a year?
Well, first of all, you probably should talk to your associate dean or whomever that is more focused on the research issues in your college. I'm sure you could also talk to the folks over in Fred King's shop about that kind of opportunity. I mean, there's so much variability between one unit and the next. I'm not the best person to advise you of that. But I would seek out Fred King or some of his people in the research office to help you with that.
Have you had folks, so I'm pursuing Fulbright and trying to do them at the same time. Have you had folks sort of double those on top of each other, doing the sabbatical and Fulbright in the same semester versus folks doing the sabbatical in one semester and a Fulbright in the following semester, or is there any pattern associated there one way or the other?
Well, I think most of the time the Fulbrights are used when somebody's taking a year off.
Yeah.
So the question is, it's a different kind of question.
Yeah.
But again, hypothetically, if you took a one-semester sabbatical and then you tried to leave for one semester to do the Fulbright, we would probably be questioning on why it didn't overlap.
Okay, so I'm actually going for the overlap, and it came up, other folks are recommending the other way around, which
Yeah.
seemed a bit strange to me, actually. I actually thought that the using your sabbatical for the Fulbright was, 'cause I don't have 12 years service.
That would be normal,
Okay, good, that's what I was wondering.
yeah,
Good, thanks.
yeah. Gee. Well, okay, so first of all, you will be able to review the video, for better or for worse. But we don't need to hold you here until 5 o'clock just for general principles. You know how to reach us. Some of you have heard me say that my phone number is easy to remember because it's almost perfect vision, 2021. All right? Chris's number is?
9591 should be on the top of the application.
Yeah.
Or in the application.
Yeah. And of course, we'll be happy to help you however you need us to do that. Yes?
I guess the final, is there a date that this is due?
Yeah, they're on the 15th.
Is it?
Yes. And it depends on if you're going spring,
Back-
fall, or
first
full
page.
year.
Back on this page.
So if you're looking for July through December, the fall semester, in your chairperson's office by the 4th, and then ultimately in our office by February 1st. And then that would hold true for the full year. And then if you're looking for that following spring semester of the following year, it would be due June 30th into chairperson's office, and then ultimately August 1st in our office.
Okay, so it is conveniently written in the material that you got. Yes?
Sorry, I may have missed it, but so we will have to do this, in terms of paperwork, we'll have to do this application. Do we need anything from the place, from the other university or the other organization?
Yeah, I think there's language in there too about that, that there should be confirmation that you've been invited or whatever.
Okay, so probably a letter. some
Yeah,
invitation,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Sorry, quick question. If your project is, say, a book, does the plan, do you need to be like, in this month I will write this chapter, and this month I will write this chapter?
That would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you need to think it through that way, rather than simply saying, I'm going to take a year to write a book.
Okay.
That probably is not enough detail.
Okay.
I mean, I would appreciate more detail, personally. John?
By a faculty member obligated to return for a full contract year, is that from August to June? Is that what they mean? For instance, I take a sabbatical in the fall semester, and I come back and I teach in the spring, and then I would teach the next fall. But they were assuming, we're talking in May.
We're assuming 1 year from the point at which you return from the project.
Okay.
I mean, we're not saying if you do it in the fall, you have to do the spring and then the entire next fall and spring.
So like 2 semesters.
Yeah. After you finish the project, 2 more semesters.
So theoretically, as of December, I could have completed what I was required.
Yeah, yeah. Yes,
I'm assuming this is online, I could find the application,
yeah.
just,
So if you go to the faculty website, faculty.wvu.edu, and then if you look for Provost McConnell's picture, I think it's the 3rd link down, it'll say sabbatical leave.
Yes, we actually could have told you that and not distributed any paper, but we thought it would be good to have something in your hand. Yes.
I'm the only faculty in my program and I'm directing the program. My question is, if I go on sabbatical, since I'm supervising the GTAs who work in the program, observing their classes, going through their teaching material, any issues to classroom also. So my question is, does that also similar to directing PhD students? Like, in other words, I will be also supervising the GTAs while I'm on sabbatical?
Well, I think it depends on how you work that out with your department chair.
Okay.
Yes.
Could you expound upon what would cause you to not approve external remuneration?
I can't give you a general plan because I need to see it before I said yea or nay. Yeah,
There's
I mean, part of it is the extent to which there might be a conflict of interest involved, you know, and the context of it. But, I mean, off the top of my head, I don't know yet.
Okay.
I'd have to see it.
Okay.
Okay?
He's gonna go fly a plane.
Yeah,
You give him
yeah,
an
yeah.
idea, so
No,
that's
no,
what
no
he's gonna
flight
do.
lessons or anything like that. Yeah, all right. Any other questions? Well, then I will call this to a close. Thank you for coming. And if you, as questions evolve, let us know.